All right. Good morning, everybody. Al Iverson here. We are us. This is us. I'm Al Iverson. I work for Kickbox, product manager, doing a little bit of deliverability consulting too. Kickbox's deliverability tools, email verification, deliverability consulting, kind of stuff you might need to help you solve deliverability related issues. In my role here at Kickbox, I oversee development and adding features and functionality to our cool little bit of deliverability tools. But before that, like Brian alluded to, I've been in email for a while now, actually going back almost as far as Spamhaus. We'll touch on that in a little bit because I'm old. But I've been doing this for a while. I know Matthew has too, so I'll hand it over to my industry colleague, Matthew Stith from Spamhaus, and let him introduce himself as well.
Well, as Al just said, my name's Matthew Stith. So I'm the industry liaison at Spamhaus, and that's just a fancy word for relations. But essentially what I do here at Spamhaus is do webinars like this, show up to conferences and give presentations. No, it's not all that much glam and glamour, but essentially it's bringing people together within the industry, connecting people, and figuring out how Spamhaus can work within different industries, email, hosting, whatever you want to say. I've been in the industry not as long as Al, but what we're coming up on 17 years now. I think my math's not that great. Before that, I was working at abuse desks. I was a postmaster. Essentially I've seen a lot of the abuse and seen a lot of the challenges that people have. More or less come to work here at Spamhaus more or less to help get that message out, to be able to talk with people, to be able to help people understand, the ways that you can get yourself pointed in the right direction.
Awesome.
Hey, one housekeeping note that I forgot. Sorry, all to butt in, but hey, if y'all have questions or as they come up, just throw them in either the chat or really the best way is to hit that Q&A button, right? So everybody should have a Q&A button at the bottom of their window. Yeah, just fire those off and we'll field them and we'll try to take them as they come in. And also afterwards, we are going to be recording the webinar. We are recording now, so we will definitely send that to y'all afterwards. So.
Yeah, we got a nice follow-up email planned with a lot of the links and stuff that we're going to cover in here, and we'll beef that up based on what we discussed today here to make sure that nobody misses out. So you get a copy of the recording as well, along with links to everything. So you don't necessarily have to take a whole bunch of notes. And as Brian said, please feel free to throw questions at us. We're happy to take time to make this more interactive and make it more of a discussion. So here's where we'll start until people start pummeling us with questions. Talk through a brief history of Spamhaus and Blocklists and all that fun stuff, and what got us to what got Spamhaus to where they are today. We'll talk more about reputation and why it all matters, and what other contexts are there beyond just marketing, right? And that's we're going to touch more on why Spamhaus does what it does. There's a lot of bad stuff happening out there that's not just email marketers run amok. There's a whole bunch of bad guys doing bad things. That are difficult challenges that Spamhaus and other security and anti-spam vendors face, and touch a little bit about on that in more detail. We will also talk about domain reputation best practices. Domain reputation is sort of the new hot thing. I sort of say that tongue-in-cheek, but it's also quite true that both the biggest mailbox providers like your Gmail and your Hotmail and the third-party reputation providers and anti-spam mechanisms like Spamhaus are really focusing on domain reputation as their modern identifier and thing to track when it comes to reputation, goodness versus badness. We'll trickle that into best practices overall, and we'll talk about the wave of Spamhaus informational listings. We've got a whole bunch of information there. We're going to have plenty of time for questions. We'll have links for where you can go to learn more, and so on. So let's kick it off here. Matthew, you want to take the floor, take the stage, and give us a brief history of the universe?
So it all began with a man on a boat. Well, not exactly, but so our founder, Steve Linford, essentially this was early days of internet, well, not early days of internet, but early days of the proliferation of the internet, to where everything started to grow at an exponential rate. So, this is at the turn of the century, essentially. Steve found that, he was getting a lot of spam and he was tired of it. And of course, what he was doing was not unique in and of itself, because, you had Maps with Paul Vixie, that was also doing mail blocking as well. But, Steve went out and he was just like, I need to figure out a way to solve the spam problem. So he went out and he started to collect spam from various sources, to be able to find out, where these things were being sent from. And what he ended up doing was he created the Spamhaus block list. And anybody who's on here today that knows about Spamhaus knows what the Spamhaus block list is. And if you've been on the Spamhaus block list, you definitely know what the Spamhaus block list is. So, essentially, this list was created, via tiresome manual research. And, it was to be able to bring bring a little bit of pain to those that were sending spam. And, it grew and grew and grew, and he was able to bring researchers on because people saw what he was doing and they were interested. They wanted to come on. They wanted to be here and they wanted to do what Spamhaus was doing. And, just from that, we were able to build this essentially into, what you're starting to talk about here today. But, we have grown more beyond just talking about IPs. We now have domains. There's also certain things that we look at in content with our hash block lists. But really, what it all signals around is your reputation on the internet. And we want to, we're there to be a leader there in domain and IP reputation, so people can understand. They can come to Spamhaus and be like, what's my reputation look like from Spamhaus's perspective? One thing I always want to let people understand is we're an industry leader. We are an authority. We're not the authority, because there's so many resources out there that people can use. But the original thought here was to protect mail streams, things that were coming into the network and blocking all sorts of stuff. We've kind of gone beyond that, essentially, to more provide people that reputational signal, because even when you're talking about mail, you're talking about authentication and stuff. That's not really something that's necessarily going to get you in the inbox and not get you rejected ever again. It's what people are treating as a signal. And you can think about other pieces of what you do in your everyday mailing to think about what signal is. But it's really to give you that insight of, am I doing all of these things right? Am I configured correctly, et cetera? We're going to talk about configuration, all that stuff a little bit later. But, you have to think about yourself beyond just, is my email campaign correct and all of that. It's important, but, you need to think about things a little bit beyond just what your email is doing, but think about what your whole reputation, how you look on the internet is.
Yeah, thinking back to the early first days, right about at the same time that Steve Linford was, what was it, Ultra Design was his web design company back then.
Yeah.
I was working for a graphic arts company too, and setting up our first Unix servers and set up our first internet email, and just started to get bombarded with this gross, disgusting spam that I do not even want to describe. And I don't even mean I'm swear. I mean, this is beyond the realm of kind of disgusting stuff that you can't believe people would purposely send this to other people. And so that was how I got my introduction to it too. And so a lot of us just started to have to figure out ways to deal with these problems, because there had been no broad or shared mechanisms to sort of trap or reject or stop spammers prior to that. The internet by design was a series of open mechanisms. SMTP was originally an open mechanism, right? There's not a lot of locks and keys there to keep bad guys from doing silly stuff. So we started to build this clamp on stuff, and we started with IP reputation, right? Or sort of Blocklists as sort of the baby footsteps for IP reputation, where we would get spam from an IP address, and so we would block that IP address so that somebody couldn't send us any more spam from that IP address. And it kind of grew from there. And if you think about it's a little oversimplistic, but you think about with the growth of Blocklists to actual reputation providers from then until now, right? At first, we're just cataloging unwanted mail, but then you start to pay attention to the other things that happen along with that, like, oh, is this mail actually a phish or an attempt to deliver malware? Does it lead to a bad website? What's the reputation of the website that it's going to? Is it coming from an IP address that's part of a botnet? Is it part of some sort of broader sort of fingerprintable, identifiable mechanism for badness? And so you can kind of see where Spamhaus got the start, like a lot of us did, just identifying bad mail, but bad mail leads to identification of other things, and taking that to the next level means being able to identify all of those additional really bad things. We're going to touch more on this too, but it kind of ties into the point of, hey, marketers, remember that it's not always just about you. There's literally bad guys doing bad stuff where certain security and anti-spam researchers probably don't want to go to certain Eastern European countries, because it would be like physically risky for them based on trying to stop people from doing bad things. So to me, that's really interesting, because it got started about the same time, and you watch what evolves and doesn't evolve, right? If you look at IP addresses, there's 4 billion IPv4 IP addresses. We had that whole thing of we're running out of IP addresses. What do we do about that? And at some point you say, well, cataloging goodness and badness of just IPv4 ranges is a starting point, but what's next? You start to see challenges like shared IP pools, providers that are too big to block, stuff where it gets into a large provider like a Gmail, a Microsoft, a Yahoo Mail, any of these big ones that host mail for millions of subscribers or thousands of domains or both. And IP reputation starts to fall short in some of those cases, because it's all shared IPs, they're all on the same sort of infrastructure. And that's yet another place where taking it to the next level is very important. And that's where domain reputation comes into play as well, to be able to better identify the good from the bad based on metrics beyond just sending IP addresses.
Absolutely. So, now, what did he just say? Domain reputation. So, think of your domain reputation essentially as, your credit worthiness, your credit score, things that are uniquely attached to you. Well, you can say you as your brand or your company or you as an individual. These are things that are going to be able to follow you as you do things on the internet. Now, you can just say, well, if I get bad reputation on one, I'll just get a new domain. Well, that means that you're starting over from zero. So, people need to think about, when you start up your brand, when you start your company, et cetera, that, make sure that you're very careful what you choose. Now we can start talking about TLDs, like, should I do something that's not .com? You can. It's just being able to build your reputation out. Now, I understand that there are some places where you may get punished a little bit based off of what TLD you use, but essentially it's really about what you're doing with that brand, how you're building up, making sure that you are following best common practices, which we will talk about in a few slides, but make sure that you do that type of stuff, and make sure that when you are tied into a network where you're hosted, where you're sending email from, make sure that all of that is aligned and people can understand that, because they'll know who you are, where you're always going to be coming from. Now you may have to change that every once in a while, and that's why it's also important to be transparent with your customer base. Be transparent with the industry, saying, hey, we're adding on new IPs. We're going to be migrating to this service. It's always great to be able to say that type of stuff so people can understand, okay, they were coming from here, but now they're suddenly going to be coming from there. But we're going to know that that's happening because they're telling us about it. And you can look up your domain reputation pretty much anywhere, regardless of where you go. And also, that's an important thing to understand, is know the neighborhood that you're in, because there's a lot of times where you may be on some type of network and you could be just surrounded by trash. that can impact your domain reputation. So just think how it's like multiple layers there when you're looking at domain reputation, because you can look at the IPs here, but there's only a finite resource, especially when you're talking about IPv4, and then there's just a gigantic for forever resource of IPv6. And with that domain, that's a unique identifier to you. So that's an important thing that you need to keep thought of, and make sure that it's not just the things that you're doing in the email stream. Make sure that some of the stuff that you're doing outside of the email stream. Do you have a good website put up? Do you have all sorts of other pieces? Is everything configured right? As I say, I'm going to say configuration probably about 6 billion times, because it's just one thing that we constantly see challenges of. So with that, you can manage that reputation and give yourself that identity that you need to keep going and keep making yourself that strong brand, and hopefully get yourself into inboxes and stuff. But that's more something that Al can talk about.
We did have a question, like what's about you're building your reputation, that process. What can you give a high level overview of what the process is, how long it takes?
Yeah, definitely.
I'll let you go first, Al.
Yeah. So the next slide doesn't really show it, but we'll put that up here because it'll be a good transition from there. Building up your domain reputation, and unfortunately I didn't get it done. I've got 10 things you need to know about your domain and domain reputation that is going to go up on the blog here very soon. But it's make sure you consider what's the right thing to do about registering a domain. Spamhaus has got a great series on this too, by the way, which will be linked in the follow-up email. Should you buy a domain? No, not if you can help it. Should you use a cousin domain or a similar domain or a lookalike domain? No, not if you can help it. You want to have a domain that's actually pre-existing. Spamhaus itself even blocks domains that were registered in the last 24 hours, part of their ZRD, I think, filtering. I ran afoul of that myself, setting up a new server, doing some testing. But other mechanisms will look at newness beyond that 24 hours. So realistically, you want to have an existing domain that actually has some history and some use. Then it comes when comes to the point of using that domain for email. You want to make sure all the little authentication bits are set up properly. You've got SPF and DKIM in place. DMARC, you ought to have DMARC, though it is not a direct thing that sort of drives inbox placement. None of the authentication things, any of those are guarantees that you're going to get to the inbox, but it's harder to get to the inbox without email authentication in place. And that can be a subtle and tricky message, and I've gotten called out on it before. So I want to make that as clear as possible. Email authentication does not guarantee inbox placement, but if you don't have it in place and it's not working properly, it's going to be harder to get inbox placement. So you still have to have a good reputation. You still have to be sending wanted mail. You still have to drive high-ish levels of engagement there to be able to maintain inbox placement over time. But you really ought to have that email authentication in place. So those are all sort of the table stakes. What gets you to the entry point of being able to send emails successfully, and then it's building up your reputation. We talked a ton in the past about IP warming, building up your IP reputation over the first 30 days or so of sending, starting with a few thousand messages a day and limiting the amount of volume and slowly growing that volume over time. The same theory essentially applies to domain warming. It's a little hand wavy. It's not as necessarily exacting. You don't have to be as exact about it compared to domain warming, but you want to build up that reputation by building up that volume over time. You think of, if you're sending your biweekly newsletter to 25,000 people, you might want to, and you're just implementing your new domain, you might want to split that send up over 3 or 4 days, the first couple of weeks, maybe 4 days the first week or two, and then 3 days, and then 2 days after that. So again, it's not exact steps, but you're starting out low on volume and building up. And expect a little bit of wobbly reputation, because during that time, ISPs don't know who you are yet. So a little spam spam foldering, junk foldering is not necessarily unexpected. But at the end of that 30-ish days, if you're sending wanted mail, you're not hitting spam traps, you're not getting high spam complaints, your chances of getting into the inbox are really, really strong.
Yeah.
So that's a mouthful. Matthew,
Yeah.
sorry, I didn't mean to steal all the air.
No, no worries. No, there were. I was reading chat and listening. So there was the question about ZRD. I don't know if that actually came out, but if my comment came out. But yes, we do block domains that we have seen in the past 24 hours. So essentially, listen to what Al was just talking about. Warm-up campaigns, getting authentication set up. Hopefully you have a website set up too. And you've gotten all of this stuff, all of your ducks in a row for everything. You getting that done in 24 hours, it's possible, but you're not going to get your email's not going to be warmed up. And also, what we see is quite a few, and it's really in the first 2 hours that you really see that the real bad stuff is going to start just spewing out as much mail as it can. So we do it for 24 hours. The thought there is, why are you sending email that quick? Why are you doing all of this stuff, that fast? And that's why we call it zero reputation, because it has no reputation. We've never seen it. And that's giving some people that type of buffer. And it's also a good thing that you when we're talking about using domain reputation, customer vetting. If somebody comes onto your network with 20 brand new fresh domains, are they a good customer? Maybe not. You might want to pick up the phone and talk with them. I know that some people are self-service in how they work, but think about that type of thing when somebody's coming on, when you're vetting somebody. How new is this person? What's their footprint look like? What's their domain reputation? So it gives people that understanding. And I wanted to answer the other question regarding specific entities and whatnot. When it comes to individuals, very, very unlikely that we are going to make any exceptions in that circumstance. What we do kind of look at is when it's shared space, we will think twice before blocking something like that, because our point is to help people change behavior for the good of the internet, but also not to bring the internet crashing down because somebody's doing something completely wrong, especially if they're on a shared resource. So we don't really make those exceptions, especially when it comes to politicians and whatnot, because they love to spam. All of them. It's incredible. And more or less they have things built into their regulations that allow them to do this freely. But when we start seeing things, it's not something where we're going to be like, well, it's political spam and we don't want to create a nightmare. It's more of, you're doing this wrong. Nobody asked for this mail ever. Why are you sending to this? So it's more of not who you really are, but it's what you're doing in more of those types of circumstances. So with that, we can keep on talking about here using domain reputation. And Al, do you have some insights that you want to talk about? We can just ping pong back and forth.
Absolutely. So the political one is timely because we just had an aldermanic and mayoral race here in Chicago, and unfortunately, one of our local neighborhood aldermanic candidates decided that buying a list and sending spam would be a great way to win friends and influence people. It's silly for multiple reasons, because you think about, you just if you were somehow able to magically grab an email list of everybody in the neighborhood, and you're the underdog candidate for alderman, and not a lot of people agree with you, you are setting yourself up to email a list of people who are in great numbers going to be unhappy with that mail. Not just that it's unsolicited, but they don't agree with your point of view and they don't like you, whatever. So just from that, starting from go, it was this ill-considered attempt to we got to blanket the neighborhood with email messages to try to tell people our point of view. Now, And so there was a pretty lively discussion over all of that on the neighborhood forums. And of course, the law and can spam comes up, and I weigh in because while I'm not a lawyer, I am a big mouthy deliverability expert who has strong opinions on this kind of thing. And I pointed out that, or it was pointed out to me numerous times by some people who do actually have law degrees, that can spam says it's perfectly legal for political entities to send spam. Well, first off, that's not exactly what it says, but what they intend to say is that can spam is meant to restrict or govern certain kinds of mail, and that does not include political mail, which is true, but it's one of those things that's got to have a big fat asterisk next to it because it's kind of a true but useless statement. That what it really boils down to is this: can spam, again, starting from the point of the law, can spam, true, does not restrict political mail, but can spam has some really useful stuff. If I recall, I think it's Section 8 that specifically empowers internet service providers, mailbox providers, providers of electronic services to be able to set restrictions, set what they'll allow, what traffic they'll allow, which means what mail they'll allow, and they're allowed to block whatever they want. So in other words, you have this mail is okay to send, but it's also okay for providers to block it. There's nothing in there that says a provider has to let garbagey, unwanted political mail through. That's a very important distinction, because when you look at the rules of the providers, which are, you think of MailChimp, Constant Contact, iContact, Campaign Monitor, Salesforce Marketing Cloud, all these different places. Some of them have different levels of success with stopping spam, but ultimately they all have specific anti-spam policies that disallow sending unsolicited mail. People are only supposed to end up on your list if you opted in, and they all have those policies. And if you report that mail to them, in a lot of cases, if they get enough reports, that sender gets their sending account from that platform suspended, disabled, or terminated. Now, it actually, there's a long story here. I'll try to bring it back around to domain reputation, because there's actually a connection here where this aldermanic candidate was sending through one of the little SMB focused, small and medium business focused email service providers, one that I know very well. It's been around forever. So I and others reported this mail to them, and we think that person's account probably got suspended. But the point up until that point, I didn't want to have them tell me anything, secret behind the scenes. You apply your policies. I know you do so fairly, but I'm not trying to, I don't want to know anything that I'm not supposed to know. I don't want to get anybody in trouble for giving me info later. But point being that, so I had the neighborhood people saying, well, but the platform allows it. Anybody can upload a list and send to it. And yeah, anybody can do anything. Anybody can go into Gmail and they can send an email to the president with a threat, a physical threat, right? Anybody can do that. You can't stop it. It's not thought crime. That's not how stopping spam works. It's oftentimes reactive to specific things happening. And so in that instance, yes, somebody can send spam. And so you get spam from other people and you think, oh, spam is okay because everybody else is doing it. The fact of the matter is when you're doing it at low levels and you're doing just tiny amounts of sneaky stuff, it's harder to catch, right? If you think about, literally just think of the numbers. If you're somebody who likes to speed and drive faster than the speed limit in your car, if you do that every day, 5 times a day, every day, you're going to get caught a lot quicker than if you only do it once every 6 months or a year, right? It's just a numbers game. The same thing can happen with spam, especially in these providers that are on shared environments where you have tons of clients all sending off of the same set of IP addresses in very small volumes. Rolling up numbers to be able to identify who's good and bad just based on sending IP address, and then even based on client ID, can get a little tricky and tough to sort of monitor and police. And now here's where we bring it back to domain reputation. Domain reputation is a pretty good way to help fill in the gaps reputationally there, because if you are set up on your MailChimp or Constant Contact or whatever, you're in a better place if you fully set up that email authentication. It makes the mail identify as you, not as just some random client of that email service provider platform. And that is a signal and an identifier that the big mailbox providers like Gmail, like Microsoft in particular, use to try to tell good people from bad people. So anyway, long story short, in this scenario, yeah, you know, political spam, yeah, you can send it. Some people get away with it because not every spam gets caught. But at the higher level, the mailbox providers don't like it. The email send platforms don't like it. And a lot of times, especially when you see this local stuff, like I had to deal with this here in Chicago, like I talked about, and then prior in Miami, people are doing this stuff at just tiny little volumes, so they don't get noticed by a lot of the reputation services, or they don't necessarily get picked up on automatically by their own sending platform. But that domain reputation, again, helps fill in those gaps, because that person sets up themselves for deliverability success. That means that only works best when they're sending wanted mail. So you get people who set up their domain, they're sending unsolicited mail in low volumes, they are more likely to land in the spam folder quicker based on that domain reputation component. And it gets tricky. I don't know if I'm too far off in the weeds here, but the good thing about it is that helps fill in that gap in reputation. The frustrating thing is that it can make domain reputation a little trickier, because if you do just low numbers of bad things, you can end up with spam filter placement, right? That's the fallacy of cold leads right there, is you send small amounts of unsolicited email to try to figure out how much you can get away with. And it varies by provider, it varies by phase of the moon, it varies by day of the week. These filters are not static. And so you do that just a little bit of unsolicited mail because you got to do your cold leads. We bought this list, it's very important to us. And boom, you end up in the spam folder. And that's domain reputation working right there. Is it's that additional identifier to help identify good people versus bad people.
Wow, that was a lot, Al.
Sorry, I go on.
Yeah, so just to look at a couple of questions that are coming in here. I know that we're not going specifically, by what the presentation is, but really this is so we can sit here and talk at you, and you provide us questions back. So coming back to the questions here, you have Jennifer who just asked, Spamhaus blocked us. No, we didn't block you. We just published a list and somebody else blocked you. So really what that means is, we provide our data to people. And what our data usually means is that if it's in one of our block lists, let's be specific about that. If it's in one of our block lists, that means that we recommend that you do not accept email or whatever from this IP or from this domain or from this resource. So because essentially what it means is there is something wrong with it. Either it's sending spam, it's a phishing website, it's malware, it's command and control. I can keep going down lists and lists and lists of what it could be, but essentially it has a negative reputation. And it is negative enough that we have published it in one of our block lists that we provide to providers, that those providers use on their gates to block email from coming in. So what that really means is we're not the ones that are blocking that mail. That's the person that you're trying to send to that's blocking the mail. Yes, we are publishing it, but we're not controlling all of the gates on the internet. Wouldn't that be a fantastic thing? We could probably stop all of the spam if we controlled all of the gates on the internet. But essentially that's kind of what it is to think about is, the network that you're sending to has some type of challenge with you that, of course, is using Spamhaus's data. And the reason that they use our data is we try to be as timely and as accurate as possible. I know that we're not 1,100% accurate all of the time, but we try to be as accurate as we possibly can. And also when people are having challenges, we do try and work with you in some way, shape, form, or fashion. I know there may be varying degrees about those stories and whatnot, how that works, but we do want to help you change, how you're doing things and make you go in a right direction. And when we're coming back, and let's go back to domain reputation, we look at these 4 little bullet points that we have here. It's a constant ongoing thing. It's not something you just look up somebody when they come onto your network, you never look at them again. Constantly reevaluate, who you're sending, what you're including in your content, especially when it is domains and IPs. Is there something wrong with the IP that's behind this domain? That's the A record behind the domain. Is there something wrong with it? And it'll help you understand and be able to fix things to a little bit finer degree. So you're able to constantly maintain that reputation and that positive reputation. And, that's where we are moving towards, is more of looking at a reputation. You could potentially in the future have a bad reputation with Spamhaus and not be listed in one of our block lists. But what that may end up happening is you may go sign up for a service somewhere using your domain and you have a bad reputation and you may get blocked from signing up. It's not going to say because you're in the DBL, it's going to say because you have a negative reputation. So think about things in that way, that it's not necessarily a bit of a 1 or a 0 if you're blocked. It's here are all the things that you can be doing. And out of these things, you're doing this many wrong. That could be giving you a negative reputation. So it's trying to widen that gap. So all of the good is much more, and the bad is like that big. And to talk about how can I get 0 bad? Well, try and follow all of those best common practices. Talk about all of the time, but think about the continual looking at what your reputation is, and it's always a snapshot of what you're looking at. But continue to look at it, continue to evaluate. And hopefully I answer that question well enough for Jennifer. But it's essentially, we don't block it. We just publish the data.
Yeah. And, historically, there used to be a subset of very unhappy people who would say that Spamhaus, Maps, Sorbs, whoever, are a bunch of vigilantes. And it's kind of hard to be a vigilante when you actually are hired to provide that security. Right. It's when if hypothetically Microsoft or Yahoo is using the Spamhaus blacklist, that means that they have chosen to opt in. They've chosen to sign up for that. And frankly, a big provider like that or a big company like that is paying for that. They're probably not doing that for free. So that's paid security. That's not just some vigilante who shows up and starts barricading the doors without anybody knowing what's going on. I think that is a good segue to best practices here. So just a couple of quick hits on what are the best ways to make sure you're doing everything right from a domain reputation perspective. A little bit marketer focused, trying to be helpful to the audience at hand. We touched on some of this stuff already. Talked about, do you need to buy a new domain? It's best to use your existing domain, best to use a subdomain of that existing domain if you need separation, either for technical reasons or even for reputation reasons, right? It can make sense to have a marketing.kickbox.com subdomain for marketing email, an orders.kickbox.com for transactional email, just to build up separate domain reputation. Depending on your industry, surprisingly, sometimes transactional emails can get and sort of a surprising amount of complaints about them. And providers are often willing to work with you and sometimes even whitelist around stuff like that. But it's important to have that. That's an example where having sort of a dedicated domain specific to a certain type of mail can be a good thing to help you be able to special case that mail if you have to deal with problems later, or at least to try to help prevent problems. The bad way to do that, though, is cousin domains. Now, this is right in the middle of the screen there. Let me show you what's an example of a cousin domain, and that's kickbox-mail.com. The reason that is bad news is because if you train your subscribers to be receptive to mail from kickboxmail.com, you also sort of accidentally train them that they might be receptive to mail from kickboxmail2.com or kickboxmail3.com or mailkickbox.com, or anything where some other unrelated person, a bad guy, could register a domain that pretends to be you. And they don't have to get it great. They just have to get it sort of like it. That's why you want to avoid cousin domains as much as possible. The unfortunate truth is there's a lot of cousin domains out in the world, and they're not all going away overnight. So, but if you see somebody else doing that, that's probably because that's a domain that they set up 10, 15 years ago at their ESP. It's not a best practice today.
Yeah. And, touching on cousin domains, when you start publishing things like that, it gives the miscreants a great idea because it makes it that much easier. Because if you do Kickbox Mail, well, you can do Kickbox, Nail, and that may confuse, and people are just going, oh yeah, I'll click on that. Prime example was which credit bureau was the one that got compromised. and gave all of our data to everybody. Can't remember which one. It was Equifax. It was one of the E's. But anyways, they were like, all right, so we got compromised. We're going to pay out this big settlement. Here, go to this website. And it was something ridiculous like come and get your equifaxsettlement.com. And almost immediately you were seeing all sorts of lookalike websites. And really, when you went and looked at the website, it looked like it was a fraudulent website, like what you're looking at. And from that, you just there was no thought behind it, because they were just like, oh crap, we need to go put this up right away. And that's a very important thing. Why couldn't you have just done settlement.equifax.com? You have an endless, so on this other side of your domain, there's these things called subdomains, and you can use an endless amount of them. And the good news is your regular domain, let's say Kickbox, the reputation of that, your subdomain reputation is tied to that in some ways, shapes, forms, and fashions. Yes, there are some individual things that are looked at with regular subdomain reputation, but we want to make sure that if it's a good domain and it has subdomains, and they're at least hosted in the same neighborhood, they're not somewhere hosted in Botswana somewhere where all of Kickbox is in the US, you can be pretty sure that what's being created there is a legitimate thing. So that's why you don't really even need to do cousin domains when you're thinking about your stuff. Now, back when we're talking, previously, you could use them, but you don't really need to do it. Just keep your business as it is. Build that brand up. I know there was some talking about rebranding and whatnot, and it's really just follow those things that Al was saying. You got to be patient about it. You have to do it in small bits. Slowly move yourself over. Yes, you may end up in the spam folder. Yes, you may get rejected, but at least you'll understand that, don't switch yourself completely over and start having those problems right away. Gradually move yourself over, gradually make yourself understood and known throughout the internet. And that's what's important when you're talking about these things. I know that it's not a 100% perfect science, that you're never going to get blocked if you follow A, B, C, and D, because that's just the problem with the internet sometimes, that we can't fully trust all of what we're seeing. Sometimes it's reach out to Spamhaus, reach out to your provider, reach out to the person that you're sending to, or you can. There's a great large community here of industry folks that are definitely willing to answer some questions about things. Never be afraid to ask questions. There's sometimes where people say, I have this stupid question. I was like, no, it's not a stupid question. Well, maybe it is, because we wouldn't ask a question if it wasn't stupid, because we don't know what the answer is. We want to be educated. We want to be able to understand what somebody's going to say. So definitely reach out, ask questions, and next thing that we're looking at here when we're looking at the best practices, URL shorteners. Don't use them. Why? There's no character limit in your emails. You're not Twitter, so you can make your URL as long as possible. There's no reason to do it. And also there's fancy HTML that you can just make it, this small when the URL is this big, but there's no reason to use them at all. And it's just going to degrade your inboxing and the reputation of the mails that you're sending. So don't do that at all, because the next line that we have down there is don't look like a spammer. You using URL shorteners, that's looking like a spammer. Using cousin domains, that's looking like a spammer, because that's what they do, because they can't go and register PayPal.com. They need to register PayPal info, you're going to get blocked.com, because that's what they do. That's how they try and trick you. They try and take advantage of the fact that we're all too busy. We're getting too many emails. We're looking at tweets. We're looking at Facebook, Instagram, whatever. And we just happen to just casually look over and like, oh, this is from PayPal, and click on it, enter in our details, and then you're owned. Just make sure that you do things that don't make you look like a spammer. I know that there's also people that talk about, well, do you look at content and whatnot? Spamhaus doesn't necessarily look at the content that's coming in, but the content that you do have in your emails is important. It may be something that the provider that you're sending to is looking at. Don't put 17 exclamation points in your subject or anywhere in a message. Don't scream at people with all caps, etc. Just those types of things. And Al, I'm sure that as I keep talking, I want to give you a chance to say a couple of things about the best practices as well.
Yeah, definitely here. The only thing I would add is just sharing domains. You touched on a little bit with domain shorteners, URL shorteners, right? And we don't mean to say that bit.ly sucks, is evil, anything like that. They're not. But the problem is that domain URL shorteners and shared domains show up in spam a lot. And so any time you have shared resources, whether that be a link shortener like bit.ly or the default ESP domains that your sending platform will apply to you to help you sort of shortcut the setup steps for email authentication. Anytime you're on a shared resource, that means that there are other people also using that shared resource, and not everybody understands best practices, or not everybody is pure of heart, right? Some people are good, some people are bad. Even if they're not bad people, there can be people who are doing something wrong because they don't know any better, right? So anytime you're sharing a reputation, whether that be a bit.ly or the default domains for your ESP, like the normal, if you use, MailChimp or Klaviyo or Constant Contact, they have sort of default domains that they will default signatures domains, like DKIM domain signatures they'll apply to your messages to help you with the email authentication setup bits. Anytime you're sharing stuff like that, it's a bit like sharing needles. It's a little, there's a little bit of hyperbole in there, but not a ton, right? If you're sharing reputation, it is a little bit like sharing needles. Shared domains can cause problems just because you can't tell what other stuff is happening with that domain name. So the best thing to do, like Matthew said, is really make sure that you are setting yourself up to be identified as you and not as a mix of you and somebody else and 5,000 other people using bit.ly and 3,000 other people sending from Klaviyo, et cetera, et cetera. That's the best position you can be in from deliverability and from a domain reputation perspective. That's why it's so important. I talked before about the negative aspect of it, right? With it filling in the gaps and allowing people to put mail in the spam folder a little more easily, but it also rewards good senders. That if you have a good reputation, you have strong engagement signals, you benefit by standing by yourself. And for example, on these little shared platforms, the little email send platforms that are targeted at SMBs, doing things right, sending wanted mail, and setting up your own domain reputation makes you much more likely to get to the inbox. There's a definite correlation and reward there. All right, what else we got in the questions here? This is great stuff.
Yeah. So we can go and we can talk about informational listings, but I don't know if we need to when we're talking about 9 minutes till the top of the hour. But this is something that I'm curious if the group here is interested in talking about them. I could definitely say some things. So, but since people can't go too fast, I'll lightly touch on it. I'll give it a couple of minutes. Cool. So first of all, people that are senders probably have noticed that we did these things. So in, I think it was July last year, there were tens of thousands of these informational listings created. Now, what they are is they are listings that we are publicly making available, but they are not listed within our zone. So we are notifying networks, letting them know, hey, there is a problem on this IP. Now, again, this is IP, this isn't domain. And there's stuff that needs to be corrected on it. Again, not blocking anything. Now, if somebody sends back an IP that says it's being blocked by one of Spamhaus's lists, which we're not doing the blocking, somebody else is doing the blocking. I know that blah, et cetera, et cetera. But we're not blocking based on the SBL, based on the Spamhaus block list. These are informational only. Now, one thing that we have done is we have put these on hold. They are on pause for now. And what we are doing is we are converting them over to a more of a signal. And this is something that we have heard from the ESP community, and that having a type of early warning signal. And this is what that will be. It will be that type of signal that's going to say, there's something wrong with this IP, and be able to provide you some information on it. And also some information eventually to how you can resolve the challenges that are going on. And a lot of what is happening with these informational things is it's just poor sending practices happening, bad bounce management, bad list management, sunsetting policies. We've seen and heard things about suppression and whatnot. We've written some articles about it, and Al has written some articles about it as well. And it's essentially just to tell people to constantly be a steward of what you're doing. You can't just declare victory and just say, "Oh, right, my email campaign is good for forever." And that's why I was saying, when you're looking at that domain reputation and your IP reputation, constantly look and see what's going on with it, and see, where things are going. Are you sending to somebody who's never accepted an email from you? And there were some people who were just like, "What? I didn't know that was a thing." Yes, it is. You want to constantly be evaluating what you're doing. And as this evolves, we're going to make this available to networks that want to be able to monitor that signal, and be able to say, okay, there's a problem here with this IP, and then start digging down into it until it becomes what we're going to start doing. Is it's going to be a signal, then it's going to be an informational listing, then it's going to be a real bad listing. And it's actually going to be something we're going to recommend people to block. So that's what's kind of happening with those informational listings. Now, I know people are going to ask, well, what's my time frame for all of this? We're working on it. Hopefully in the next, it's going to be coming out. And we'll be able to provide that to people. And also, there's the question about, when is escalation going to happen with this type of stuff? Where are you going to go from signal to informational to an actual real live listing? That's my favorite phrase. It depends. So that's a little bit with the informational listings.
Good deal. We'll have a bunch of links for those, about more information about informational listings in the follow-up email as well. I think we'll have time to answer maybe one more question if we do it right. But while we get to that, I wanted to share a list of links. If you're colorblind like me, the color differences here are kind of atrocious. I apologize for that. That is entirely my fault. But this is good stuff. Some of it related to what we're talking about, and some of it not. Like, if you want to learn more about email technology, and you're trying to better understand the concepts involved in spam filtering, blocklisting, SMTP, etc., that's where stuff like mail in a box and SWACs can come in really handy. I run mail in a box in the free tier on Google Cloud. It's actually possible to run a free mailbox provider today. You don't actually have to be Gmail to actually send and receive mail. But that's just nerd stuff you want to do for fun. But we got a bunch of other links here. The big long link to the ebook will be in the email, and also I put it on my spam resource blog yesterday as well. And there's other stuff on there, 2 different blog resources for myself and Jennifer and Spamhaus, if you want to learn more about this. And of course, a random plug out of nowhere for my employer, Kickbox. If you need help with deliverability tools, consulting, email verification, this is a message from your sponsor. Feel free to reach out. We're happy to help you. So shall we look at what 1 or 2 more questions here we can squeeze in?
One I thought was interesting. I don't know if y'all want to take this or if there's another one that y'all found interesting, but just kind of like, hey, what if you're in the doghouse? What if you get listed and then you get blocked? And then you realize the error of your ways and you want to change. Is that going to be, is that the kiss of death for your previous domain and you should move on and try to build up another one? Or, is it worth it to try to salvage? And
okay.
how?
We talked about don't just go register another domain. Don't just go register another domain, because you're going to have to start all over. No, if you were doing bad forever and ever and ever and ever, yes, it's going to take you quite a while to get things repaired. But also it's you need to make sure that you know what to do, and that's using things like all of these resources that we have here. Fix that reputation. It's not something that's going to be easy, but it's easier for you to start with something that's already known rather than start something that's unknown. We've seen many networks that go from black to gray to near white. Let's say near white, because not everybody's completely white. We all get messy at some point or another, but that's what you need to do, is just follow these best common practices, read as much that you can, ask questions. You can communicate with Spamhaus. What's still going on with my stuff? And you can it's a painstaking process, but repair that reputation brick by brick, and you will be that much stronger, because people will be able to be like, man, I remember when X was such a terrible sender, and now look at where they've evolved to. And getting yourself into that trusted state is a much more stronger experience, because they know where you came from and where you've gone to. Now, if you change your domain, that's going to all go away.
Exactly. And there's it's not just Spamhaus that is gonna, you're not gonna get tripped up just with Spamhaus. There's Gmail, Microsoft, other providers that have their own internal mechanisms. And when a lot of those mechanisms tend to be 30 to 60 day rolling windows of statistics. So in other words, like Matthew said, it takes time, but it means that domain reputation is definitely recoverable. Fix the problem, fix the bad practice, and build it back up. Think of it like an IP warming or a domain warming, but it's your existing domain, because there's still the other best practice reasons to use your existing core domain. So if you can fix the list hygiene problems, fix the problem that caused the blocking or the block listing, you overall are still going to be in a better place by building your existing domain reputation back up. It's not impossible. The only times it's impossible is when there's other stuff going on that not everybody knows about, or not everybody's being told about. Like if somebody is using the domain to still send low quality, low engagement, unwanted mail, whether that be cold leads or affiliate marketing stuff. It's not like a religious thing. It's not like I'm trying to tell you that I don't want you to do it because of my personal conviction. It's a practical matter that sending those types of mail breeds lower engagement, and lower engagement breeds less ability to get to the inbox. And then you add on top of that the higher complaints and spam traps and bad lists, and all you do is you end up tripping into problems.
Oops. No, those are great points, and yeah, I really appreciate y'all digging into that. I know it's probably make a whole nother webinar just on that. That, and we still have a lot of questions that have been unanswered. So this is clearly a topic that folks are interested in, but we're just past the top of the hour here, so we'll go ahead and wrap up. But yeah, I mean, in the chat, people are mentioning, I definitely agree. Really appreciate, Al and Matthew, really appreciate y'all sharing your knowledge with us. And I personally learned quite a bit. And this is definitely one webinar where I've learned more. So, we're always getting better, we're always improving, and we're getting smarter. So we can become better, more legitimate senders. But we will be, to wrap up, we will be soon following up with the recording of this and all of these resources here that are going to be listed out. Definitely encourage y'all to go through that, especially, of course, Kickbox, but also, check out Spamhaus's deliverability ebook there. That's a more comprehensive resource. And Al has a spam blog, a spam resource called Spam Resource. So definitely check that out. Spamresource.com. And yeah, we'll be sending all these along with the recording. Any last quick highlights or takeaways for everybody, Al and Matthew?
Just thank you so much.
Yeah, there's my email address. Use it at your own peril. Don't subscribe to anything. You will get blocked. But essentially, yeah, thanks for attending today. And we're more than happy to answer questions outside of this webinar. We're both on, email, LinkedIn's and Twitter's and all sorts of things. So, you can find us. We can answer questions.
All the medias. Awesome. All right, y'all. Appreciate y'all again for attending. Thank you for your time. Keep your eyes peeled for the follow-up email with all the resources, and we'll talk to you again soon.
Right.
Thanks,
Thank
everyone.
you.
Bye-bye.